Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Jenny Blalock? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the incident, then offer my analysis. Jenny Kate Blalock was born on July 8, 1979, and lived in Knoxville, Tennessee. She graduated from high school in 1997. In 2001, she earned a bachelor's degree in human resources from the University of Tennessee. She eventually obtained a general contractor's license and started two businesses, Lux Homes and Design. This was a custom home building and remodeling company, and Plantation Reclaimed Incorporated. This company reclaimed wood from barns. Jenny operated a YouTube channel called TN Fly Girl. In August of 2021, she started uploading videos featuring her efforts to earn a private pilot's license. In June of 2022, she purchased a 1965 Beech 35 C-33 Debonair. This is a single-engine propeller aircraft with retractable landing gear. It is a relatively sophisticated and powerful aircraft for someone learning how to fly. After the purchase of this airplane, many of the videos that Jenny uploaded featured her flying it. By early December 2023, she had 16,000 subscribers and about 750,000 lifetime views. Many of the recent videos have been taken down since the incident that I will talk about in a moment. The channel featured videos of Jenny's experiences through her pilot training, including some of her more challenging times. Here are a few of her video titles that sum up her channel pretty well. What did I miss on my checklist before takeoff? The mystery of my autopilot. Is it possible to fix it? Will we make it before nightfall? Aircraft malfunction at 4,000 feet, emergency landing, and what to do when nothing seems to work. Some of Jenny's videos featured her flying with her father, James. She described him as someone who had, quote, years of flying experience, unquote. Now moving to the timeline of the incident. On December 7, 2023, 44-year-old Jenny Blalock was with her 78-year-old father, James Blalock, in her Beech Debonair. Jenny was planning on flying from Knoxville Downtown Island Airport in Knoxville, Tennessee, to Saline County Regional Airport in Benton, Arkansas. These two locations are about 500 miles apart. The purpose of the trip was to get instrument upgrades for the Beech Debonair. Jenny took off at 9:48 a.m. Her father was in the passenger seat. The Debonair climbed to 2,500 feet and stayed there for about 12 minutes before climbing to 6,400 feet. Jenny was flying in clear skies with visibility of 10 miles. It was 53 degrees outside. When the aircraft was about 161 miles into the trip, air traffic control told Jenny that she was left of course. She responded by saying that she was correcting the course. Starting at 10:19 a.m., it appears as though Jenny was experiencing some difficulty maintaining a steady altitude. She started a series of descents and climbs. Her altitude varied between 6,400 feet and 5,300 feet. At 10:57 a.m., the Debonair descended down to 4,300 feet, where it was traveling at 164 miles per hour. The aircraft then climbed to 6,050 feet, where it was traveling at 97 miles per hour. At this point, the Debonair entered into a rapid descent. The maximum rate of descent reached 11,900 feet per minute, and the maximum speed reached 262 miles per hour. Air traffic control attempted to make contact with Jenny, but she did not acknowledge them. Then they received a communication from Jenny, where she stated the airplane's registration, the word Debonair, an emergency declaration, and finally an unintelligible word. About a minute later, a communication was also received from the passenger, James, but it was largely unintelligible. At 11:03 a.m., Jenny's aircraft slammed into a wooded area near Pulaski, Tennessee. Here is what investigators found at the crash site. The bodies of Jenny and her father were recovered near the wreckage. Presumably, they died due to the collision with the ground. A witness told the media that one of the victims was on fire when emergency services arrived. The debris field was about 300 feet long, and several treetops leading to the wreckage were chopped off at progressively lower heights. This appeared to reveal the path of the aircraft. Impact forces and fire destroyed the cockpit, and the flight control system components were all destroyed or significantly damaged. No flight instrumentation or gauges were recovered. The settings for the autopilot could not be determined. The elevator trim tab was set at about 5 degrees of deflection in the nose-down direction. The maximum deflection in this direction for this aircraft was 10 degrees. Investigators found 2 digital recording devices which were intact and will no doubt be examined further. These were almost certainly the cameras that Jenny was using to produce videos for social media. A witness stated that right before the crash, the aircraft was flying at a high speed and the engine was running. The aircraft was not in a stall and it was not spinning. The preliminary report from the National Transportation Safety Board did not identify any obvious cause for the crash. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts in a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. Jenny had about 400 hours of total flying time when she was killed in the crash, although her skill level was consistent with someone with fewer hours. From the videos that she released, it's clear that Jenny didn't really understand the physics of flight or how the aircraft instruments functioned. It's almost like she didn't make the connection about how her inputs via the flight controls affected the control surfaces of the aircraft. She wasn't comfortable with the basics and became overwhelmed when she had to attend to other responsibilities of flying, like watching the instruments, looking outside the aircraft, and communicating with air traffic control. Following a set of procedures was not a strength of Jenny's, although this is a critical element for safely flying. For example, in a few flights, she didn't properly go through the necessary checklists or pay attention to them in a way consistent with survival. During one takeoff, Jenny said gear down as she was putting the gear up. She may not have fully understood what the terms gear up and gear down actually meant. Item number 2. During one video, Jenny landed at an airport and drove to a local restaurant in a motor vehicle. During the drive, she failed to stop at stop signs and almost hit another vehicle when merging onto a road. In the comments, Jenny referred to her stop sign behavior as rolling stops. Her dangerous and cavalier driving style is consistent with a person who simply has no respect for the safety of the public or who is oblivious to the world around them. Ironically, Jenny drove with her head in the clouds. Item number 3. Jenny seemed to be impatient and a little bit sensation-seeking. In her videos, some of her frustrations centered around how she wasn't learning fast enough. Eventually, she realized that pressing forward without the necessary skills would be reckless. Jenny moved from one certified flight instructor, or CFI, to another and kind of went back to basics. Not surprisingly, she struggled tremendously to control the aircraft. Jenny did not understand the basics of flight. Whenever someone is teaching another person how to do something, regardless of the industry, there is an assumption that the trainee is going to learn what they need to learn. Success is the expected outcome. Unfortunately, that attitude is unrealistic. The challenging discussion that a CFI needed to have with Jenny was how flying a plane is not for everyone. Some people should not pursue a private pilot's license. Perhaps Jenny could have satisfied her desire to fly by using a flight simulator, where high-velocity ground encounters are associated with emotional consequences only. Item number 4. Consistent with her impatience and her desire to press forward rapidly, Jenny purchased a Beech Debonair. Right away, she experienced difficulties with this high-performance aircraft, describing it as a rocket compared to what she was used to flying. She suggested that the plane's tendency to climb was alarming, and she had difficulty controlling it. Typically, a pilot in training would not opt for an aircraft as powerful as the Debonair. This was way too much plane for her skill level. Jenny struggled with many of the features of the aircraft, but she had a substantial amount of difficulty with the autopilot. This particular aircraft was equipped with a Century 2000 autopilot. Before describing her challenges with autopilot, I first need to describe the concept of trim in an aircraft. An aircraft moves around three axes. The lateral axis, this is the pitch or up and down movement of the nose. The vertical axis, this is the yaw or the right and left movement of the nose. And the longitudinal axis, this is the roll or the plane banking right or left. Trim can relate to all three of these depending on the aircraft, but in this description, I'm talking about the lateral axis, the pitch of the aircraft, which is controlled by the elevators. Pilots use the control column, or yoke, to control the elevators and maintain a desired pitch attitude. This could be nose up, nose down, or level flight. The problem with this is that the pressure exerted on the elevators by the air is transmitted through the yoke. This means that the pilot must exert energy to keep the elevators in a certain position. Using the trim controls in the aircraft, which control trim tabs on the elevators, the pilot can reduce or eliminate the excess pressure and return the yoke to a neutral position, meaning the pilot doesn't have to exert any energy to keep the yoke in one place. This trim control feature is much more than a convenience. It is really necessary. A pilot who becomes tired of holding the yoke in one position is not going to attend well to other responsibilities. Trim makes flying safer and more comfortable. Some aircraft are equipped with automatic trim, but the Debonair that Jenny had did not have this feature. She needed to manually adjust the trim using the trim wheel control in the cockpit. Moving back to the autopilot, the Century 2000 controls the elevators in order to maintain a desired pitch attitude. It does not manage the trim, and it does not manage the power. The servos in the system can get overworked if the aircraft is out of trim. Therefore, trim indicators on the autopilot flash and direct the pilot to adjust the trim as needed. This is really not a big deal for most pilots. They see the indicators flashing, they adjust the trim in the direction indicated, either up or down, and they continue flying. In one video where Jenny was trying to use the autopilot, she ignored those trim indicators. Furthermore, the buttons on the autopilot are momentary push style, yet she was holding them down. There is the sense that Jenny did not understand the concept of trim and how it related to the autopilot. She didn't know what direction to spin the trim wheel based on the indicators, even though the indicators were literally labeled trim up and trim down, the same labels seen on the trim control wheel. Jenny found herself in the habit of turning the autopilot off, trimming the airplane, and reactivating the autopilot, instead of simply trimming the pressures off the elevators as directed by the autopilot. If Jenny didn't understand the autopilot, it stands to reason that she did not understand other aircraft components or systems either. Item number 5. Jenny had installed cameras in her airplane in order to capture her experiences for social media. Not only did she have a YouTube channel, she had an Instagram page. Clearly, her social media presence was important to her. Some people have suggested that these cameras could have functioned as a distraction. I think this is certainly possible, but there's something else about her recording that is more worrisome. There is the sense that Jenny was looking for dramatic situations to record. Several of her videos emphasized dangerous situations. She believed that a video featuring an in-flight emergency was going to be more effective at attracting viewers than a video with a title like, "I flew my airplane and absolutely nothing went wrong." Jenny may have been correct in her assumption, but I think this created a temptation to experiment while flying the aircraft. The autopilot is a great example. Instead of reading the manual for the autopilot on the ground and learning how it functioned, she kept trying to figure it out while flying. The cameras may have been a distraction, but I think the performance that Jenny put on for the cameras was the real problem. That was the form of the distraction. Now moving to my final item, number 6. What do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. Jenny was not well suited to fly an airplane and did not have a set of motives consistent with her continued survival. She was simply not learning what she needed to learn. With her low level of skill, just about anything could have gone wrong. Many obvious causes for the crash have been eliminated. Jenny did not stall, the plane was not in a spin, and no component of the aircraft was missing. This was not a case where a propeller or part of a wing fell off in midair. I think it is reasonable to believe that this aircraft crashed because Jenny supplied inputs through the flight controls that directed the aircraft into the ground. This wasn't a mechanical failure, it was a pilot error. The question, of course, is this: what kind of error was it? Why did she supply fatal inputs? Some have speculated that the autopilot trim situation could have led to the crash. This is a good theory. However, Jenny knew how to disconnect the autopilot. She had done this before in another video where she was struggling. It doesn't make sense that she simply didn't pull back on the yoke when the plane was descending. Maybe her arms were tired from fighting the autopilot for 40 minutes, or she didn't have the physical strength. Another possibility is that Jenny went into a panic after struggling for 40 minutes unsuccessfully to maintain a steady altitude. Spatial disorientation is also a possibility in these types of cases as well. Jenny didn't understand the position of the aircraft relative to the ground. At the time making this video, there is no way to know the cause of the crash. Overconfidence, less than ideal training, impulsivity, impatience, panic, and a lack of skill are all possibilities as factors that could have contributed to the crash. Jenny had a lot of tools at her disposal to bring a plane down. If she had only been as well equipped to fly a plane, this disaster could have been avoided. Now moving to my final thoughts. I think the theme of this case is how Jenny didn't give up. In a broad sense, she didn't discontinue her flight training, even though that would have been a wise choice. In a specific sense, she fought with her aircraft for 40 minutes instead of trying something different, like turning the autopilot off or simply landing. If the autopilot did cause the crash, the irony is that Jenny was figuratively on autopilot during her training, therefore never literally learned how to use the autopilot. Those are my thoughts in the case of Jenny Blalock. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.